House of the Dragon, Season 3, Episode 6, is definitely a mixed bag of an episode that hits home my theory of House of the Dragon being a bit of a 50-50 show. It did some things really well that I loved, while at the same time, some that left me scratching my head. There have been choices made this season that, in my view, have used up way too much of the show's limited runtime, to the point I'm not sure how they have enough time to actually finish telling the story in a satisfying way. I think we will have a clear picture come the end of the season, but if the first Battle of Tumbleton is the season finale, then they've left themselves a hell of a lot to do in Season 4. If I could sum up in a single word this week, it would be meh. I don't love it, I don't hate it, it's just okay. I'm not sure how I feel about the Butcher's Ball. Before I get into it, I will say this. I have no idea why they didn't end episode 5 with it. You had the whole build up to it last week. Having it just thrown randomly at the start of this episode is a really odd storytelling choice. I guess they wanted to end last week with the shock of the murder of the Gold Cloaks, but narratively it would have made more sense to have just done the Butcher's Ball and end with Criston Cole being shot and cut to black. It's a really odd choice. As someone who's worked in various writers' rooms at different levels, I'd love to listen in to the thought process here. I think while the Butcher's Ball is still kind of just okay, having it come after all that build up last week would have left a lot of viewers much more satisfied. Again, they're reusing a lot of lost book moments, with the dead soldiers being a trap, which I do like, kind of like the Traitor's Feast last week, and I really like we got to see at least once why Criston Cole is supposed to be one of the best warriors of his generation, and I love the fact they remembered his weapon of choice is a morning star, well technically a flail, but we're not going to get into that here. So many fantasy shows just default to sword or axe. The morning star was brutal. Sometimes House of the Dragon just lacks logic in favour of being cinematic. But the Winter Wolves just kind of spawned in. There's no way, even if you were trying to, you could hide an army that large. My logic is they killed Criston Cole's scouts or something, so they didn't see them coming. We did get some of the book dialogue, and you can always tell when that happens, when they rip it right from the page, because it's just so much better than normal. George has a certain rhythm with his writing that the dialogue in House of the Dragon just doesn't quite hit. So when they include book dialogue, it just works brilliantly. I was surprised they even let Criston try and suggest 2v1ing Oscar and Roddy, because it makes his character look better, and as we know, he is the show's punching bag. Yes, I was disappointed we lost Pate's famous line, "I'll have no songs about how brave you died, Kingmaker. There are tens of thousands dead on your account." I speculated they were going to give the line to Oscar or Roddy instead, given Pate's not in the show. And while I'm sad we lost it, like I pointed out in my recent Lost Legacy of Criston Cole video, they neglected the Kingmaker part of Criston Cole as a character. So that line doesn't really make much sense in the show. So they would have likely have had to have changed it anyway. Black Aly shooting him, I guess makes sense, given she's known for being an archer. It's just a shame she's such a nothing burger of a character in the show. Does she even have a character? The lack of Aly being, well, anyone really, makes me worry we're going to get a very watered down version of the Hour of the Wall. Or we might not even get it at all. I think the true disappointment with the Butcher's Ball, and why fans have disliked it so much, comes down to the fact it should have been one of the marquee episodes of the season, up there with Tumbleton. It's a huge event. It's the kind of thing Game of Thrones would have centered an entire episode around. Yet it feels just wrong it was relegated to 5 minutes at the start of a random episode it has nothing to do with. Like I said, while it's not perfect by far, I think the mood of the fans on the whole, from what I've seen on social media, would have been a lot more positive towards it if they had ended last week's episode with it. It's a really baffling choice. But I guess that's what happens when you only get 8 episodes a season. Cutting the seasons down from 10 has really done some damage. The story would barely have fit in 40 episodes. 34, well, I think we're witnessing the impact of it here. Ryan Condal gets a lot of shit for the creative choices he's made, and I think that pushback is fair and warranted. But this whole 8 episode business is all on HBO. I'm not going to talk that much about Alicent getting caught yet again. The whole tunnel thing and getting trapped was nonsensical enough. There's supposed to be these super secret tunnels a handful of people know about, yet it seems that everyone just knows about them. I guess maybe that's why this particular tunnel was blocked off, if that makes sense. They were known. Daemon is pissed, and Matt Smith does it so well. We're really starting to see that divide begin to slowly form between Daemon and Rhaenyra. His utter contempt when Rhaenyra invokes Viserys was brilliant. I know a lot of people hate them, but I love the addition of Sabitha Frey and Torrhen Manderley to the Small Council. Just, well, spectating. What is clear is Rhaenyra's motivations and goals are starting to clash with her pride, and it's leading her to make decisions that will appease that rather than fix or face the wider issues she's having. It's clear we're not going to get full-on Maegor with teats in the show, but we are starting to see the cracks. The Baratheon flip-flopping is a bit odd, I guess. But given what we know about Boros Baratheon later in the war, it kinda a bit fits his character. I have a feeling the only reason this was added was, again, for the random assassination plotline. For Tumbleton to work, they really have to humanise the Dragonseeds, and I think they've done a brilliant job of doing that with Ulf. You can totally sympathise with how he's feeling. He's happy for his new life, but mourns the loss of the old. For me, the jury's still out on Hugh, but I will touch upon that later. Most importantly, we get a shout out, the legend that is Hot Pie. I'm just really tired of the 4 pointless Alicent and Rhaenyra scenes we get each week, mainly because most of them really add little to the story, or could just be done in one scene. Each one is so similar, with the same conversation again and again. So much so they kind of just merged into one in my head. The amount of good content that's been left on the cutting room floor, especially the last 2 seasons, just to fill that time with Alicent and Rhaenyra scenes each week is baffling. I liked them in season 1, I didn't mind them in season 2, but we're really just treading water waiting for the plot to move forward. Like I said, we know so many good scenes that have been cut. Last season there was a scene filmed where Criston Cole goes to Alicent and breaks down in her arms, where he talks about all his grief and regret, and she comforts him. Now this would have happened before he rides off with Gwaine, and is why Alicent randomly goes looking for him just as he's about to leave, and they have that farewell. A scene like this really would have gone a long way in humanising Criston Cole. I would actually make his nihilistic arc and why he cares about his honour so much in Season 3 make a lot more sense. Another really good example is from Season 3 Episode 1, where half the dialogue is cut when Criston deals with the Raper. The bit that was cut is effectively Gwaine saying something along the lines of, "This is what happens when men lose their dignity," to which Cole asks Gwaine to bring him the Raper. This would have gone a long way into explaining why last week Gwaine still had hope for Criston and was fighting to save his life. Those 2 lines of dialogue that were cut could have had a huge difference in how people view Criston's arc this season, and had meaningfully impacted it in 10 seconds? Yet, each week we have this same Alicent and Rhaenyra scene again and again, with slight variations. I understand no adaptation can be a one-to-one kind of thing, but this kind of stuff is screenwriting 101, basic level storytelling, and has nothing to do with adapting. It's just poor writing for the sake of giving Alicent and Rhaenyra screen time. In a way, I think they kind of self-sabotaged their own show with this insistence on maintaining this relationship past season 1. One thing I will say about this scene though, Alicent is right about Rhaenyra killing the babe. Even if she doesn't intend to or want to, someone around her, be that Daemon or Mysaria, if it were a boy, might do. That babe will always be a threat, full stop. Anything else is wishful thinking and naivety. Some book spoilers here, so be warned. Alicent's comments about Helaena being confined are clearly setting up her cracking, her demise, and how Rhaenyra ends up getting the blame for it. So while this scene isn't utterly pointless, you could have condensed all the Alicent and Rhaenyra scenes into one single scene and given the screen time to other characters. More on this later, however. Now, what I like about Daemon's reaction to the Gold Cloaks quitting, it shows Daemon's learning that goodwill, reputation and charisma can only get you so far. None of that matters when it comes to tangible things, such as getting paid or feeding your family. But what is interesting is that Daemon doesn't really learn from it. He's just like, fine, I'll do it myself. I think this might also be setting up the Moon of Madness, justifying the city getting out of control thanks to the lack of gold cloaks. I guess this does streamline things a bit. I'm really unsure what they're doing with Corlys this season. I get the anger about Rhaenyra not legitimizing Alan and Adam is going to be the primary point of conflict with her and not loyalty itself, if that makes sense. I suspect the legitimization might be leverage used by, say, Larys next season. Maybe they're having him do this to really hammer home his conflicts for the viewers. The Aegon scene this week is less substantial than last, but does serve a small purpose. It's more about Aegon testing Tyland. While he mislikes Larys, I think he's learned to respect the fact he's telling him the truth about his character, and he's not afraid to do so. I still wonder how they're going to handle the rest of Tyland's arc. Will they find some way to unify it with his book arc? And yes, Tyland's grave digging is shit, and he might as well have not bothered. I think this week is where the Rhaenyra taking Nettle's plot just lost me. I get what they were trying to do with the start of the season, getting her involved in the gullet, but I really don't know what they're doing now, and where they're going to take it. It really feels like they're just treading water. My biggest question is, are they going to go full on Nettles? Have Rhaenyra disappear in the Vale forever? Or will they try and bring it in line with her book plot at some point? If they're not going past the Hour of the Wolf, then who knows? Just jumping forward a bit, but I do love Jane Arryn. She's a strong character, but funny in a dry way. Like I said, with the casting of Torrhen and Jane, I would love to see a Regency show. How they do that without Unwin Peak though, is a big issue. I know I'm in the minority here, because for the most part, I really enjoy the Harrenhal stuff. It seems to be one of the areas of the show where they're not afraid to drop some deep lore, even by my deep lore standards. Plus, if you're a regular viewer, then you know for me, Alys Rivers is one of the biggest mysteries of the expanded lore, and one of the plot threads left hanging in Fire and Blood, that I hope we see resolved someday. Is her relationship with Aemond what I imagined when I read Fire and Blood? No. Because Aemond is very different to how I imagined him, especially with the mother issues. There's this weird tension between them. I don't know if you would call it sexual tension, but something, some sort of connection. Even if up till now, Alice's motivations are unclear. I think later in the episode we get some answers. I don't really have much to say about Alan and Baelor. I'm not surprised they went with the kiss, they've obviously been building towards it. But I'm not sure what the point of all of this is going to be when it's clear House of the Dragon won't go far enough post-dance for it to be relevant at all. What I find interesting, at least from mine and my fiance's point of view, it's hard to care about this relationship because Baelor's had such little real meaningful development, other than really Jace's death. In fact, I would argue that Alan, this season alone, has had more tangible impact and growth than Baelor, which is a shame because she's a really cool character and I do hope we get her Dragonstone plotline in the show. I find a lot of the Ormond scenes fascinating. He's just a very different character from what I was expecting. His dynamic with Gwaine is intriguing. For the most part, he's done very little fighting during this war, and has ensured, wherever he goes, he's looked after in a manner that he sees fits his position. While Gwaine, the cousin he belittles, is the one who's in the field, sleeping in the mud, watching his men die. Gwaine also highlights just how batshit Ormond's plan is. Yet he's destabilising King's Landing, but they have effectively trapped themselves in Tumbleton with no way out. Gwaine's bond with Daeron is also endearing. I never really thought that with Otto and Alicent so far away from Old Town, that Gwaine would be the only real source of affection he's ever gotten. Even Daeron knows Ormond's plan is crazy, and the whole concept of him being king is ridiculous. I really do enjoy Gwaine, and he's an example of how you can take a very minor character from the book and expand their role in the story in a truly meaningful way. It proves that not every change from the book is bad, as long as it is well written with care. I do love Helaena is starting to get a voice, calling out Alicent's bullshit. I think this lack of trust is explained very well in later scenes. But the tapestry she's been making is fantastic. It shows Aemond and Alys at Harrenhal. If you want my take on this, it also looks like there's a bloodline coming out of Aemond, which would fit well with Alice's later plan. And well, if you know the book story, maybe the bloodline is a hint at that as well. But again, Given we're not going that deep into the story post-war, I don't really know what all this is going to be for. Now, I know Alys and the Dragon Eggs have blown a lot of book readers' minds for many reasons, especially those who subscribe to the whole Dragon X gene theory, which I think is actually making a lot of sense, at least in the show. First, we got the OG Rhaenyra Targaryen callout, the Queen in the West, a reference to the death of Rhaenyra Targaryen, and the fact that Dreamfire, Rhaenyra, now Helena's dragon, laid multiple clutches of eggs over her life, 3 of which were very likely stolen by Alyssa Farman and would later potentially become Daenerys' eggs in the main books. Rhaenyra lived at Harrenhal for a few years, with the only other people there being her few retainers, the boy lord Maegor Towers, and his small household. There certainly would be enough time for Dreamfire to have laid a clutch of eggs there. And given that turbulent nature of Harrenhal's lords, and it's been, nearly 60 years since Rhaenyra died, I guess it is possible that they were forgotten. How Alys found them is another question altogether. We know Alys's plan is to have Targaryen princes with Aemond, and given where her story is left in Fire and Blood, it would explain where that supposed dragon at Harrenhal comes from. But again, as I said, there is no way the show gets that far post-dance. So what's all this for? Just to justify the relationship? If you want more info on this, I would encourage you to check out my Aemond Alys House Went theory video I made a few weeks ago. There's basically a tinfoil fan theory that the current generation of Stark children, via Catelyn Tully, via House Went, could actually descend from Aemond and Alys. Yeah, it's a tinfoil theory, but it's a really interesting one. Rhaenyra losing control in the throne room is exactly what I've wanted to see. Like I've said before, we're not going full Maegor with teats, but we're going to get something akin to it. We also got her cutting herself on the throne, which is something I was sure was not going to happen. I do wonder if we're going to get rumours within the small folk about it over the next few episodes that could fuel her decline even more. She really is starting to crack, very slowly. We have Daemon LARPing as a gold cloak, which is a bit dumb to be honest, but it's clearly being used to set up something like the Mood of Madness, even if it's not on the same scale as the book, with Ormund as the instigator, rather than someone like the Shepherd. We also have Daemon being an utter dick to Ulf. Like I said, the events of Ulf's storyline in the next few weeks is going to make a hell of a lot more sense and be certainly justifiable. Hell, I never thought I would actually be backing Ulf White. I do find the whole Baratheon assassin plot just dumb. I like the way Gwaine does actually deduce they're fake. And well, bold John Roxton is just badass. Maybe the whole point here was really to hit home Ormund's weakness when it comes to the smells. I don't know if it's going to build up to something. I don't know what they're doing with it or what it's going to build to, but they've got my attention with it. I really don't get what they're doing with Hugh at this point though. Yes, his wife has badly suffered and some really fucked up shit happened to her on her way to Tumbleton. But Hugh genuinely was trying to better himself to help her and pull them out of poverty, give them a better life. I mean he did maybe get caught up in this whole Sir Hugh Hammer thing, but I'm struggling to see what Hugh's motivation at Tumbleton's going to be. Is it going to be his wife? If so, considering she doesn't really want much to do with him, how's that going to work? So yeah, some huge question marks over Hugh. I really liked Hugh's storyline up until recently, so I hope they have something interesting planned to pull me back in. So I think this is the only Rhaenyra Alicent scene that matters this week. First of all, we have Alicent once again advocating for Helaena not to be confined, which is going to become vitally important given what's going to happen over the next 2 weeks. I think the reason they are pushing this idea so hard is so, like the book, there is a reasonable way Rhaenyra can be blamed in some way for Helena's fate. The captivity is a contributing factor if that makes sense, and Rhaenyra doesn't care. The nonchalant way she tells Alicent she will look after Helaena is really setting her up for a fall. I really love Rhaenyra's reaction to learning that Helaena is a dreamer, especially given the whole Aegon's prophecy thing. I would love to have some scenes between the two this season where they actually meaningfully interact and not via Alicent. They are sisters after all, and I think so many people in the audience actually forget that fact. This whole Alicent going to Harrenhal to kill Aemond thing is just really, really stupid. It is just an excuse to get Alicent out of the Red Keep and away from Helaena for obvious reasons. So, this final scene with Alicent and Helaena really did catch my attention. Like, let me put it this way. I give you good odds we're not getting Maelor, and Ryan Condal has just been teasing us all. I'm about 80% convinced there was moon tea in the stew that Alicent has given her. She's just being very insistent about it. Plus, we know there's footage from the trailer of Helaena supposedly giving birth. And if we look where we are in the timeline, that just doesn't make sense. So yeah, I think Alicent might have slipped moon tea into the stew. Where she got it from is another matter altogether. I've tried to be vague, and I have already given spoiler alerts, but spoiler alert again in case you're a non-book reader who somehow stumbled this far into the video. I will say this. We know George R. R. Martin claimed in his Toxic Butterflies blog post, Helaena would kill herself for no particular reason. It was one of the things he was most outraged about, which caused the rift between him and Ryan Condal. And I suspect, prior to Season 3, that may have been the plan. I think they pulled this whole pregnancy thing out of their arse because they realised without Maelor and Bitterbridge, Helena's death just doesn't work the same. It won't have the same emotional impact. I'm not saying they changed course because of George R. R. Martin's blog post, but I think the Toxic Butterflies of cutting Maelor did rear its head this season, hence why they had to pivot and Helaena become pregnant. So rather than Maelor being torn apart at Bitterbridge, we're going to have her miscarry because of Alicent. I don't know how John Roxton found Littlefinger's jetpack and flew all the way north past King's Landing in a matter of days, or even hours, but people can calm down about Corlys. He's not dead. I think it's very clear they've just taken him hostage. If he was going to be dead, they made sure we had seen it. So for this episode, for me, it was just a bit meh. Not bad, not good. There was some stuff I liked, like the OG Rhaenyra shout-out, as well as some stuff I really did hate. Nothing too egregious. The Butcher's Ball was just fine. It's a shame it never reached its full potential, but I think it became clear weeks ago that it wasn't going to be the case, given what they were doing with Sir Criston Cole's arc. So yeah, kind of average, maybe 7 out of 10. I'm hopeful for next week looking at the trailer, but I'm getting the feeling this is how Season 3, when I look back, will feel. Just fine. Not good, not bad, just fine.